Hi, I'm Signal SCV Deputy Managing Editor Perry Smith, here with Executive Editor Jason Schaff, Signal Business Editor Steve Kiggins, and Political Reporter Christy Long. Jess Phoenix, welcome to our Signal Editorial Board meeting.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're creating these informal conversations with the candidates for the 25th Congressional District so we can have an open-ended discussion on the issues that matter most to our audience. Some of the questions came from our discussion, others from social media, from your potential constituents. We know we're not going to get to all the issues, but we want to touch on some of the ones that we hear about the most. But let's start with an easy one. What's the number one takeaway you want voters to have about Jess Phoenix?
If people really want a different sort of person in office, someone who makes decisions based on facts and evidence rather than opinion, I'm the candidate for that. I want to bring my scientific training and background and real-world experience to Congress to make laws that are going to help people from a factual basis.
And so Jess, besides being a scientist, what skills and experience make you most suited to represent the district?
Well, I've actually had a long and varied career. I've had 19 years of work experience at this point in industries ranging from sales to global business development to being a veterinary technician and working for the state archives for the state of Arizona. So I've actually had experience at the state government level. I've worked extensively with the federal government for my nonprofit, Blueprint Earth. I founded that, and so I've had to go through the federal 501c3 process, the federal grant-making process, and I've worked overseas, and that sort of international experience gives me a very broad perspective with which to address local issues in a very real and results-driven way.
With all that varied experience, what made you want to run for Congress? But some people might say that's probably the worst job in the world because nobody gets along and nothing happens. Why do you want to do it?
I think we really need people who bring problem-solving skills to the table. And I have a really great role model, well, a couple of role models in my family for service. My parents were both FBI agents. And so I grew up with the understanding that your career should be focused around giving something back and doing something for people other than yourself. So I had been doing that already with the nonprofit and with my science communication and education work. But I think in Congress, we're at a point right now where so many people are lawyers and business people that they are paid to argue for whoever is funding their run or, their cause, whatever that might be. We need different people bringing perspective to Congress, and a lot of scientists are not well trained in communicating effectively. That's something that I actually do bring to the table, and I think that by having a scientist's perspective, particularly on, say, something like the House Science Committee or the Energy Committee or the Transportation Committee, I would be able to have a real measurable impact to make people's lives better in a way that isn't pushed by partisan agendas and instead is driven by evidence.
Can you expand more on how being a scientist specifically could help you be a better congressional representative than, say, our traditional pack of lawyers and such?
Or even a doctor.
Yeah. So I'm particularly different in this area because I'm a field scientist. So a lot of people envision a scientist and they think of, somebody in a lab coat stuck in a laboratory. My laboratory is the world. So I have had experiences that are literally life and death, because when you're working on active volcanoes, when you're working in cartel-controlled zones, when you're working in extreme remote conditions, you need to be able to create a plan and have a plan B, C, D, and E in case things go wrong, because everything that can go wrong does go wrong. So I have been in charge of leading research expeditions to some of the most remote places on the planet, 6 continents now. And that kind of leadership is very different than your standard issue training. Plus, looking at things with the scientific method in mind, which is essentially trying to remove uncertainties by looking at all available evidence and testing what you think might be true. That is how you get to the best results. And I have that training not to just get a result, but to get the best results for whatever it is that I'm working on. And I think that really sets me apart.
Even though working with people is different than working with natural things that might not be. Actually, they're both volatile, so.
Yes, the volatility is very, very true. I mean, anything that emits noxious gases, I'm pretty well skilled in handling. But no, it's also, it really is people management too, because you never rely on just yourself when you're doing, say, field expeditions, or if you're managing a bunch of people who are working on a grant, anything like that. You have to deal with different personalities, with conflicts, with different agendas, and you have to be able to say, what is our overarching goal? What is the real objective here? And how are we going to accomplish that? And so that's something that I can really bring to the table. It's a bit different.
You know, let's piggyback on that a little bit, and as far as being a newcomer to politics, how would you plan to make an impact in Congress, especially in what is and could still be a Republican-controlled Congress?
I really think that this is another thing that distinguishes me from anybody else in the race. Obviously, I'm challenging Steve Knight, and he sits on the House Science Committee currently. I was endorsed by Congressman Jerry McNerney up in Northern California, and he told me that one of the reasons he's backing me so strongly is because he knows that I am a fit for the House Science Committee. Most freshman representatives go in and have zero power, zero ability to get things done because they have to wait in line because of the seniority that the Congress has set up right now. So what I would be able to do is make a very strong case and have a lot of support to serve on the Science Committee because of my qualifications and background. In that role, I would be able to make an immediate impact to start working on policies that will be helpful for our community from day one.
What does the Science Committee deal with?
Oh boy!
A lot of things
yes,
that we don't realize.
it's actually the Space Science and Technology Committee. So it covers a broad area that it can include everything from STEM education, trying to get women and girls engaged in STEM, all the way to what our policy should be, maybe about the Space Force that Trump has proposed. So it really, the Space Science and Technology Committee can have a hand in almost anything that is research-driven or fact-oriented that we use to make decisions about technology and science that impact our everyday lives. So everything from the environment to the stars.
So, our next question is going to be, hang on, sorry.
Lots of questions, I get it.
Yes. Is it true that you were at any time registered as voting for another party?
Yes, I was, actually. My parents were both Republican, and I grew up, and when I registered when I turned 18, I was Republican. And then the next time I had to register, when I moved again and changed my permanent address, I registered as an independent. And I actually changed my registration to Democratic. I believe it was right when I moved to California in 2007. So I think when I lived in Arizona, I was registered independent, and prior to that, it was Republican registration.
Oh, so why did you change your affiliation 2 times?
Yeah, well, I went out into the world, and I left where I had been raised, and I saw more out there. And as I grew and matured, my beliefs and my understanding of the world and policies involving the government, particularly working for a state government, really helped shift my perspective about what party aligned closer with my personal values.
Mm-hmm.
Is it like, do you find that Democrat and Republicans have, their philosophies have the gap has widened over since the time you were Republican, or what's your perspective on the two parties right now?
I think that we are at a time of historic polarization between the parties. And I say this because my undergraduate degree is in history, so I've actually studied American history quite extensively. And I think we are at an inflection point culturally because we have this availability of instant connection between people from all different backgrounds that we never really had before. And we also have people working in various influential sort of ways to try to drive us apart. So whereas you'd see people in Congress have friends across the aisle, I mean, you had John McCain being friendly with John Kerry, and Lindsey Graham and McCain, and then I forget who the third one of the Three Amigos was, but he was it was Lieberman, and they were known as the Three Amigos. You're not going to see that now. In fact, you rarely see people making friends across the aisle. And I think that is extremely damaging to our culture because we have far more in common with each other than we do that divides us. And it really makes me sad for the country to see people just flinging curse words at each other and calling each other names and not recognizing that, hey, you know what? You work with these people. You go to school with these people. Your kids are friends with them. Like this is our community. So it's something that I would really like to see people work towards bridging that divide and making sure that we're not going to agree on everything. I tell people that all the time. I say, you're never going to agree 100% with any elected official unless it's you running for office. So you just need to make sure that you understand where your commonalities are and how we can work together.
But aren't you going to have, in Congress, when you get in, you're going to have the Democratic Party bullies, trying to keep you in line, right?
That's a great point too. Finish. I don't want to interrupt you.
No, I'm pretty much finished.
Okay.
How are you going to handle that?
So actually, this was one reason that I've decided to run a grassroots campaign. It's purely grassroots, and I don't want to be beholden to anybody other than the people who help put me in office, the voters, and real people, not just a shadowy organization or leadership of one party or another. Because I think that, a party is good because it sort of gives people a broad umbrella to stand under. But at the same time, there's a lot of people who don't fall distinctly under one party or the other. And we need to be able to say, what are the common goals and how are we going to work towards those, and not just be intimidated by, oh, you have to, jump and we'll tell you how high. That's not something that I do real well with. I like to be true to, again, the facts and also my personal value system.
Do you think the change in affiliations makes you understand the Democratic Party in a more nuanced way then?
I think it helps me to understand different political perspectives in general in a much more full and complete way, especially because my parents are Republicans, and we're law enforcement agents. So my mom was actually a George W. Bush appointee. She served under Tom Ridge in Homeland Security. She was in charge of a $4 billion budget that helped coordinate local, state, and federal first responders and coordinate them with businesses as well in communities. So I've seen a lot of the perspectives that you get from people who are more centrist, and then also people on either extreme of the political ideology spectrum. And I really think, again, we have so much more in common than we do that is driving us apart. It's just a matter of, a lot of times, how you word things, how you explain them, how you communicate them. And it really, again, it makes me sad that we are where we are, but I think we can improve it and turn it around. I have so much optimism.
Mm-hmm. So in line with how you said it's a grassroots campaign you're trying to do, campaign finance records have showed that you have raised less than your other opponents. Does that concern you?
Not in the slightest, because I have the most individual donors of anyone in the race, including Steve Knight. So I have a much broader base of support because I have been going after people who have traditionally not been engaged in the political process. So people who say, I have never donated to a political candidate before, but I'm donating to you because I like your message. I like your vision for the community. I like what you're saying we can do as a people. And so I'm not concerned about it. Plus, from running a nonprofit that I've bootstrapped from nothing, I can make every dollar go so much further. And that's through the use of people's talents. We have incredible volunteers. We have a small army of volunteers, and they are so dedicated and so talented that we've been able to achieve remarkable things already with a more limited budget. But also, when you're in the close to $500,000 range, and that's not that much money, that blows my mind, because I think about what I could do with my nonprofit if I had almost $500,000, and I'm like, we'd be set for a long time in terms of educating students. So, it really, I think you can't say that you want to change the campaign finance system and the way we're doing things if you're doing the same thing that's always been done. So I'm saying I got to lead by example here and run a true campaign that is grassroots and holds up my values.
Where did you grow up?
I love that question because the answer is all over. I was born in New Jersey, lived outside of DC in Virginia, and then Colorado is where I went to high school. So that's sort of what I say, especially because my parents still have a home in Colorado. So I went to high school at a place called
Littleton.
Yes, Littleton. Yeah, my parents' house was in Littleton. They just sold that house 2 years ago. Now they live in Castle Rock, but from 1990 until, well, where are we? Maybe it was 3 years ago now, 2015. They lived in Littleton, and I lived there from 1990 to 2000.
And where'd you go to college?
Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts.
Yes, I'm from Massachusetts.
Oh yeah, so you know Smith.
Yeah, I know Smith.
Yep.
So said you came to California in 2007?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you're living in Acton now?
Yes.
How long have you lived there?
A little over a year. So yeah, and before that
Where'd you come from?
Before that was Simi, and we had a brief interlude in Burbank when we were trying to buy the place in Acton. So yeah, I was in Simi Valley actually when Steve Knight wasn't even our representative yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So there could be no carpetbagger type thing.
No, and
since you were in Simi Valley.
Yeah, there was an early article that was published in the LA Times before I had a communications team that said I was from Burbank, and I'm like, no, I'm not from Burbank. I live there. Well, we made an offer on one house in Acton, and it fell through, and then our second offer on a different house was approved. So.
Why Acton?
Because we rescue animals. So, and I've done so much work up in this area from my geology career that I know the area really well. Like I used to lead student field trips out to Vasquez Rocks and to the San Francisco Dam site and out to San Andreas. So I know the whole district really well, and I've done soil research out, in the Antelope Valley, and this is an area that I was like, okay, I'm still close to LA, so I can still have my friends I went to grad school with and, the people I know. My husband has access to both Burbank Airport and LAX because he works for a global company that does cybersecurity. He needs to be able to travel. And yet we can own horses, we can have land because we rescue ex-race horses. So you cannot affordably keep horses in central LA. And we tried Simi. That was way too close to my in-laws. We were like a mile from my father-in-law, and I was like oh God, they would show up all the time. And I'm like, Octavio, like you're great, but please, like I do not want tamales right now. Like it's 8 in the morning on a Sunday. I'm good. So Simi was nice, but it wasn't, there wasn't enough space either. Like our horses were kind of crammed into that particular house. They just didn't, they're crazy. They need room to run. So Acton worked out great for that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
In this cycle, a lot has been made of kind of celebrity endorsements, and that's been kind of part of the campaign cycle for the different candidates. But what about political endorsements from celebrities are important or significant in a time when there are so many critical issues facing our district?
I think what's important to realize, and it's something that's been kind of eye-opening for me because I don't come from the world of knowing people who are in the news a lot, is that they're regular people. I mean, Patton Oswalt, who's endorsed my campaign, he actually worked as a wedding DJ. I mean, that's a job a lot of people can relate to. And, most of these people haven't had that life forever. There are some folks who grew up in the entertainment industry because their parents were there, but that's part of California's history. So, I mean, if we look at like even Val Verde was a community for African Americans to go to because they weren't allowed to go to Palm Springs. So even just here in our community, we have that longstanding relationship with the media and Hollywood that I don't think happens in, say, Littleton, Colorado. We didn't see it there. I think here it's a little bit more, it makes a little bit more sense because we have so much industry up here.
Why do you think you've been so successful in being able to tap into that and kind of use that to enhance your message?
I think it's actually the message itself. Being such a proponent of science and education and the environment, that resonates with a lot of people. And it's not just celebrities. The interesting thing is when we go door knocking, like one of the very first times I went out was in Palmdale, and we were knocking on doors and I was asking people what their top issue was. And it was like I listed education, environment, the economy, healthcare, immigration. And you would be surprised how many folks who live in really low income neighborhoods say the environment was their number one issue and over all of the others. And they said, well, my kids get sick when we have bad air quality days. And, I don't want them drinking contaminated water. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense because that's my position. But you see that people on all different ends of the economic spectrum and different levels of fame or no fame at all, again, we have way more in common than people think.
What are you going to do when you come, you're in Congress and you're talking with these people that do not believe in climate change?
Okay,
I love this. How are you going to handle that
Yeah.
without, first of all, coming across as pedantic
Mm-hmm.
or something like that, or
Yeah.
Curious.
No, it's a great question. I used to teach at Cal State LA, so I have taught all sorts of different people over the years. And you never forget when you're in a classroom full of 40 students looking at you and you're talking about scientific dating techniques, how we age rocks and things. Someone raises their hand and says, my youth group teaches me that the Earth is 6,000 years old. And you're sitting there going, wow, this is the middle of a class on science, And so how I would handle it was saying, well, a lot of people believe that, but what the facts show us is this, this, and this. And what I've learned since then, and through interacting with a lot of people in an educational capacity, is that the best thing you can do with somebody who truly doesn't believe something that is an established scientific fact is to ask them why they don't believe that. And then you wait and you listen and you learn, because you can't have a dialogue with someone if you just say, you're wrong and I'm right. You can't do that. And I think with a lot of the people in Congress, I would say, because particularly if you look at the history of how the Republican Party addressed the issue of climate change in the mid-2000s, they were making steps towards taking action. They were saying, how do we support preparations for climate change? But the fossil fuel industry has such an influence on the donations of people in Congress. A lot of them will say, we don't believe that science because it benefits the fossil fuel industry for them to say that. And even Donald Trump says he doesn't believe in climate change. However, his permit for a seawall at his Scottish golf course says, reason we need the seawall is sea level rise due to climate change. So it's right there. And they can say what they want in public, but to me, one-on-one, I will ask them as many times as it takes, why? And if they say, well, there aren't any facts, there aren't any research, I can say, look, I've done the research. I actually have participated in research that's been published, that's been on the cover of Science magazine. And I assisted with some of that work. I'm not a climatologist, but I have good places to go. And plus the very data from NASA, that we have, one of our most respected agencies, all tells us that humans are impacting the climate. And so it's one of those things where you can say, look, why are you holding this belief? And at some point you will come to kind of either an open discussion or they'll just stop talking and you say, okay, well, I see you're not willing to engage, so I'm going to keep going with the facts. And that's that you cannot compromise when something is a fact. You have to stay there and keep advocating in favor of what the facts are telling you.
So let's assume the Congress continues to be Republican controlled,
Mm-hmm.
and continue this conversations with science. Where can you reach across the aisle for compromise, whether it's in science or
Mm-hmm.
elsewhere, to move along agenda?
Well, one of the ways that I could do that really strongly it has to do with kind of the vision that I see for our community going forward, which is really hitting green technology and cybersecurity very hard as industries where we need to focus on as a district. I know we don't have a ton that unites Simi and Santa Clarita Valley and Antelope Valley. It's kind of arbitrary, but I think that all of our communities have this shared history of manufacturing and aerospace and innovation. So it really would make sense for us to use what we have and focus on green technology and cybersecurity as the area where we can really become a global hub. And the economic argument there is this is going to drive jobs that can't be shipped overseas, and it will help us deal with automation, because we all know that's going to be, it's coming down the pipeline and it's actually already here. You can already rent a robot to work in your business, and they call it hire the robot or hire a robot. It's you see billboards for it on the 5 now if you go down south. And we've seen a burger flipping robot at Pasadena Hamburger Restaurant. So this is very real and very present. If we are to, you just heard yesterday that California is going to be requiring solar panels on new houses. So if we are at the forefront of green tech R&D, then we're going to be able to make the very strong economic argument that we are benefiting not only the economy locally, but also the environment on a more global scale. And I think that's basic math. I think a lot of people will agree to that. If you say, hey, you know what, we're creating jobs and we're giving people a way to live a good quality of life and we're keeping the environment clean for the future, that's one way that a lot of people say, yeah, you know what, okay, I hear you, let's do that.
Okay, so take the jobs angle on that.
Yeah, it's a really strong one.
What is who's the Jess Phoenix voter?
Wow, that's a great question.
Jess Phoenix composite voter.
It's been so varied. I've had people come up to me and say, I'm a Republican lifelong. I voted for Trump. I voted for Knight. I'm not happy with what they're doing and the fact that Knight has lied to members of the community and won't meet with us. I'm voting for you. You'll shake my hand. You'll look me in the eye. And I know we're not going to agree on everything, but I get that you at least are going to tell me where you stand. And I'm like, okay. And then I also get people who are, lifelong hippies, basically, and are, all in favor of peace, love, and harmony. And it's really runs the gamut. And I have a lot of people from the Latino community who are really excited and engaged now in a way that they haven't been previously. And I've talked to women who've immigrated from El Salvador, and one in particular said, I've been here for 32 years. I'm a citizen. I've never once voted. She said, no one talks to me. You're here, you're at my home, and you're speaking to me in Spanish. I'm voting for you. So it's just amazing to me how many people are able to connect with what I am bringing to the race.
Well, how's your support in the business community?
It's been pretty good. A lot of folks who are local business owners, local artists, craftspeople, people who are in the maker economy are very, very supportive. In fact, one of them is she's crocheting little Jess Phoenix dolls and selling them. Yeah, there's a science version and there's me in a suit. So, I mean, that has to be the most innovative like campaign swag I've ever even heard of. And so, you know, she's a local business person. She sells these dolls and all of her crocheting work, and one of them was used in the movie Wrinkle in Time. So, yeah, I mean, people like that. To folks who run up in Palmdale, there's an optical business. You know, they sell glasses, and you know, they had a little gathering for me at their store where they brought all their friends, Republicans and otherwise, you know, and all the way to the far left, and they were very excited because I'm saying, look, I want to make our district not a commuter district. I want our district to be a place where people come because there are jobs and there are nice places to live and there are good cultural activities. And we have the potential to do all of that and not have people having to drive 2 hours each way to get into LA. So I think that when I say that, they get excited because there's a lot of opportunity that is now being lost by people leaving the district all the time. So if we can make our community a destination where people are excited, where the teenagers say, you know what, I'm going to stay here and raise my family because this is a great place. They don't all, I mean, I know a lot of teenagers want to leave because they're teenagers. I had that too. But there's a lot of people who care very deeply and would prefer to stay here if there was a 4-year degree granting institution here that was a public university. If there were jobs in fields that could support what they want to do, they would stay here.
Well, how could we even improve the connectivity between the Antelope Valley and the Santa Clarita Valley?
I think it's about the cultural angle. Again, it's having more events in both places that have a crossover appeal and making sure that we communicate better too, right? I mean, I know you guys have such a strong base here in Santa Clarita Valley, but it would be, I mean, I know for some of our events, we've invited Signal reporters to come up to Palmdale because that's where our campaign office is. And they've said, no, we don't go up there. So I'm like, it's not that far. I live in Acton.
Cover business.
See, now that's great. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm always surprised at just the lack of understanding in both markets of what happens in one place, that there's a mutually beneficial relationship.
And to see me as well. To see me too. Yeah. And we have the poor folks in Porter Ranch who are with us, and they're like, wait a minute, we're just this little, you know, glob that is stuck onto the big 25th district map, and they don't feel like they're part of it either. So I think that it's really important that we start to develop a bigger identity, you know, as sort of the northern part of LA County, a little eastern bit of Ventura County. Right. And, you know, the funny thing is, people have asked me, you know, especially reporters who I've done interviews with who are out of state, they say, you know, what connects the 25th district? It seems really big. And I thought about this for months and I couldn't come up with a really good answer of what the things are that we all have in common. And what finally I came up with was horses. And it's because Simi Valley has a long history of having movie ranches and horses. We have some here in Santa Clarita, and then up in Antelope Valley, same thing. So there's this history of being the more horsey part of LA County. And all right, so cool, that's it. But if you guys have a better thing that connects all of us, please tell me, because I don't know.
Commuting to LA.
That too, yes. Commuting. Used to be horses, now it's commuting. Yeah, there we go.
That's probably it.
Seems like you're kind of
commuting on horseback. Sorry.
You're really trying to reach out to your voters, and you're really trying to understand them. Now, that being said, what makes you a better candidate for the Democratic Party than perhaps your other two opponents on the same side of this aisle?
I think it's that I don't want to be a politician. That was never on my radar. It was not part of the game plan. This is not something that is enhancing my scientific credibility at all to do this. This to me is really born of a deep, deep need to take action and to help people. And I mean, if you even look at some of what I did, you know, being a vet tech and founding a nonprofit and basically trying to work in a way even with science where I'm communicating that to the public and educating people. I've wanted to help, and this just seems like a very good route to serving the community and serving the country in a way that I never planned on, and I don't want to do forever. Because I think one of the problems that we see right now with people in Congress is that they'll just get in an office, and on name recognition, they'll just keep going and going and going, and they can withstand challenges solely because of their name. And people go, oh, yeah, I know him, or I know her, I'm just going to vote for them. And instead, we should be really focused on mentoring the younger generations so that, we can serve for a period of time. Each person who gets elected can be there for 10, 15 years. And then, hand the institutional knowledge, hand that opportunity over to the younger people or to people who are older but are wanting to engage for the first time. But I don't think that it's a seat that I would have forever. I don't plan on that. I plan on solving the problems and going back and being a scientist. So for me, it's like a 10 to 15 year window because I want to be able to go out and do research again when I'm still young enough to hike around on volcanoes.
So you'd give yourself, basically a term.
Yeah, essentially.
And you wouldn't want to be a senator or
no, because I think
governor.
No. I think that for me, this is a sort of a one-time opportunity. This isn't me saying, oh, I'll run again next time, or I'll run for something else. I've had tons of people come up to me and say, well, if you don't make it, you should run for state assembly. And I had people telling me, oh, just run, because I'm in the 36th Assembly District. Right. And they said, oh, you should run. And I'm like, no. I mean, I can do better for the country.
Why is Congress why is the national seat better than the state seat for you?
So we are in a very, very Democratic controlled state already. And, in California, we're very progressive already on environmental issues and on, we try to be on education. Whether or not we're successful can be debated. But at the national level, because of the fact, I've lived in 10 states and 3 countries, and I've worked on 6 continents. So my perspective definitely lends itself more to a national level arena. Mm-hmm. And with the fact that we have so many different scientific organizations and regulations regarding the environment that span 50 states, it's much more of just a better fit for me to go for Congress. Plus, I can get the national media attention, which is what you need to raise the profile of Steve Knight, who is not very well known outside of our community.
Why are you saying you can get the national media attention?
Well, at this point, and this is weird, I didn't know this number until the other day when I looked it up because we're updating the media part of our website. I've given over 230 interviews since I started the race. And I've been on CNN, CBS, NBC, LA Times, Washington Post. the New York, what is it called? Fast Company, Wired.
Why do you think people are so interested in you nationally?
Well, there's not that many volcanologists running around anyway. There's about 90 people worldwide who specialize in what I do. So it is, there's just not many of us. And having a scientist who says, you know what, I see a higher calling right now, and I need to put my research on hold to go and do that, that's extremely unusual. And particularly because I don't look like what people picture a scientist to look like anyway. So it's it just sort of, it blows people's minds. And when I say I want to bring Star Trek values to Congress, that always gets a weird look. And then I say, think about it. In Star Trek, they actually it was a post-poverty, post-war, post-scarcity society. What's wrong with wanting to go for that? It's funny because volcanologist, everyone thinks I study Vulcans. I don't, but I do like Star Trek. But I tell everyone, what's wrong with wanting people to live long and prosper? I think that's a pretty good goal. And hey, if you can create the policy to get there, why not? Let's work on it.
Is there any other scientists in Congress?
There's a physicist from Illinois, Bill Foster. Okay. And so physicists are generally lab-based folks, a little bit more theoretical. And that's it. Yep. Jerry McNerney has a mathematics PhD, and he's worked in engineering. But there's no physical scientist there. There's definitely no geologist, and certainly no volcanologist.
So one thing I'm thinking is, given City Council's vote on Tuesday regarding sanctuary cities, what are your views on California being a sanctuary state and immigration reform?
So for one, I hate the term sanctuary state or sanctuary city because it's so misleading. It doesn't mean that if that is the status of where you live, that you're automatically free to do whatever you want and commit crimes and no one's going to say anything. That's not what it means. It's a very politicized, pretty much meaningless term. So really, what I've understood from the actual SB 54 is that it basically just says that local law enforcement resources will not be used to do the federal law enforcement's job. And to me, that makes perfect sense. Plus, sanctuary communities are statistically safer in a significant way than communities that don't have those policies, because immigrants actually will go to the police and report if they see a theft in progress or vandalism, or if they're assaulted, if they experience a domestic assault, they will go to police officers, because the police officers are not obligated to then call ICE. They can just work on that issue. So as somebody who, my husband's Latino, all my in-laws are Latino, it's very scary to us to think about the fact that people will see someone who looks different from them and potentially say, hey, or should they be here? I don't think so. Let's call someone.
What would you say to your constituents who might disagree with you and might still have a lot of fear surrounding SB 54?
Yeah, I would want to talk to them. I'd want to sit down and have a conversation and say, look, tell me what your actual concerns are, and let's see if we can look at the facts. Because as we've seen, law enforcement has actually testified in support of SB 54 because they don't have the resources to do ICE's job for them. So and they understand that it actually keeps the community safer to have the policy that California has adopted. So if your end goal truly is safety, public safety, then this is the way to accomplish it. SB 54 does move us that way. If your end goal is something else, then that might be where the disagreement crops up. So I want to find out what the true goal of people who oppose it is.
How can we get Congress to really do immigration reform? what is it going to take? Because you could be.
Well, I think there's a movement with that right now. I think it was Corbello, the representative from, was it Florida? I think he's pushing to do a bit of an unusual move to try to get a vote on the issue. And I think now that Ryan is retiring as speaker, I think it might happen because everybody knows that there is a real strong economic argument to make for comprehensive immigration reform and a distinct path to citizenship. I mean, even here in the 25th district, we have 5,100, give or take a few, people who are DACA recipients or DACA eligible. And if we were to remove them from the community, we would actually lose $159 million annually from our economy, just locally right here. So it would be a huge economic hit to not allow these folks to have a permanent status. And if you want to talk about people who are not covered by DACA, just people who are here illegally, who are undocumented, there's a path to citizenship. It worked extremely well in the Reagan years. And my husband's mother, my mother-in-law, was a beneficiary of that. And so her family was not torn apart. And she had a cake decorating business to this day. So she's been a productive, tax-paying member of society, has never once even had a ticket. And, it was just the border was much more fluid back then. And we saw a large influx of people immigrating due to violence and lack of economic opportunity in the last couple of decades. So we have to handle it now. We need to do comprehensive bipartisan immigration reform, and we need to get to work on it. We can't wait. It's a humanitarian issue, and it's an economic issue.
So we know there's disagreements between the Republicans and the Democrats. Is there anywhere where you differ from the Democratic Party on policy?
I was trying to think about that because I'm so strongly tied into just what I believe that I haven't spent a lot of time comparing it. I had someone ask the other day, do you agree with everything in the state party platform? And I was like, I haven't read it in its entirety. And I mean, you kind of skim it and you go, yeah, okay, those sound good. But it's funny because it's really long. I don't know if you've read either party's platform at the state level. They're incredibly long. So I think that for me, the main difference is how I would see how we bring candidates to the field. Because right now, they sort of look at finances as your number one thing of who could be successful. And I say, no, don't look at finances. Look at the ability to get people excited and to get people engaged. So that is something that I know I disagree with them about, because we've seen cases already around the country where the party has selected a candidate, but there's another candidate who is getting people very excited, and the party will work against the candidate who's exciting people and in favor of their chosen candidate. And I think that really undermines the voters' ability to choose too. So especially when it's pre-primary, I think allowing people in the local community to make that decision and then supporting once the primary process is over is a much smarter way to do things. That hasn't happened in our race specifically, but I've seen it elsewhere.
All right, and last question.
Mm-hmm.
Little random, little fun.
Okay, all right.
Favorite place to eat in the Santa Clarita Valley and why?
Oh my God, La Charita. Because I'm vegetarian, so I love the fact that they have such good vegan Mexican food.
That's
oh my God.
Favorite place too.
It's so good. Plus
Where's
the
that?
yeah.
Right over in
What's-
Newhall.
It's Newhall, yeah.
What specifically? Because I'm new to Santa Clarita.
Oh my
so I
gosh.
need some
Okay.
recommendations.
So they have carnitas tacos that are like, it's fake carnitas, but it's like really, really good. And my husband had some. He's a meat eater, and he's like, this is amazing. And his mom used to own a Mexican restaurant, so he is, he's got a legitimate say in that. And I'm just excited about it because finding food that is specifically vegetarian or vegan that's actually really good is kind of like a life goal of mine. So.
What are your other favorite restaurants?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I actually really like Michelada, which is over in Canyon Country. It's kind of a newer grill. It's not Casa Vieja. That one's good too, but I like Micheladas because I like the staff. They're really nice, and their flan is amazing. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think. Just because I really enjoy it too is Augie's. I watched the whole World Series there and got very sad because the Dodgers lost. I love the Dodgers and I love baseball, so I was hurting before, but yeah, Augie's is good because they got everything. Like you can everything from pizza to like nice salads and healthy vegetarian options, and plus beer. So I mean, I don't do much beer, but they have good mixed drinks and occasionally a good cider on tap. So
All right. Well, thank you so much for the recommendations
Yes.
and for speaking to us today at the Signal.
Sure.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah.
And best of luck.
Thank you guys.